When I was a corporate manager of Fairchild Industries in 1974 through 77, I met the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in early 74. At that time, von Braun was dying of cancer, but he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played, that game being the effort to weaponize space, to control the Earth from space and space itself. Von Braun's purpose in life during the last years of his life, his dying years, was to educate the public and decision makers about why space-based weapons are a dumb, dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, unworkable, undesirable idea. The strategy that Wernher von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in 74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. Now at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids, against asteroids we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it, he said, is a lie. He didn't mention a timeline, but he said that it was going to be speeding up faster than anybody could possibly imagine, that the effort to put weapons in space was not only based on a lie, but would accelerate past the point of people even understanding it until it was already up there and too late.
A crisis of leadership. We've been talking about this all week. But what if there was some sort of outer space crisis? An alien invasion sounds crazy, perhaps, but then who thought we'd ever see the stock market swing 5% a day all week long? So maybe it's not as far-fetched as it sounds. If aliens invaded, who would step up to lead us in that fight, and could we even win? That's just one of the questions the Discovery Channel's new series, Curiosity, looks at. Joining me now is physics professor Michio Kaku, who is a consultant for the series. Professor, welcome. The biggest question before we get any invasion is, do aliens even exist, and how would we know?
Well, the Kepler satellite currently orbiting in outer space has identified about 50 planets that seem very much Earth-like. In fact, every week we discover another Jupiter-sized planet in outer space. Now, to be sure, most of them probably have no more than microbial life, just germs. But a few of them may have intelligent life, perhaps even more advanced than what we have on Earth.
Now, so how does this actually work? When Discovery decided they were going to do a show on alien invasions, your phone rings because you're on the sort of speed dial for theoretical physicists who can help them do the war game for how this might play out?
Well, believe it or not, we physicists have actually studied the question of what happens if we do encounter a hostile advanced civilization in space. And Hollywood gets it all wrong. Hollywood assumes that the aliens are maybe 100 years more advanced than us, and if only we had a secret weapon, we can defeat the aliens. Wrong. Either the aliens don't bother with us because we're simply too primitive, or if they do invade, it'll be more like Bambi versus Godzilla.
And why do you say that? What techniques will they have that we can't even imagine?
Think of the fact that they could be 1,000, 1,000,000 years more advanced than us. Realize that the universe is 13.7 billion years old, and so it's conceivable that they could have weapons that we can't even conceive of. Now, in my own point of view, look at how the barbarians eventually defeated the Romans. The barbarians didn't have a secret of weapons by which they defeated Caesar and the Romans. No, they learned technology from the Romans. They imported technology. They learned the technology of the Romans and then used it against the Roman Empire. That's how they won.
So then how would we, I know it sounds implausible, but if something like this were to happen, how would we defend ourselves as a planet?
Well, initially, we would have to probe them to find out exactly how advanced they are. Do they have nuclear weapons? Do they have radio and radar communications technology? Or do they have a whole new generation of weapons that we can't even conceive of? Now, remember that for the most part, alien civilizations in outer space are not going to come to plunder us, because there are plenty of uninhabited planets out there with resources. So for the most part, they're going to leave us alone. However, if, on the other hand, one day they do attack, we have to be prepared for the fact that they're going to overwhelm us in the opening shots of a war.
Well, so what do we do?
Well, first we have to study the question. We have to send up more Kepler satellites. We have to eavesdrop on conversations in outer space between alien civilizations. This is something that we haven't even done yet. We have yet to find a single advanced civilization or life in outer space. But sooner or later, we will. The first step is to monitor them, to understand what level of civilization they have, the kinds of weapons. Second, perhaps even begin to initiate a dialogue. Now, of course, that's dangerous if they are warlike, in which case we may want to sit back and simply analyze their weaponry.
Now, why do we assume that they're going to be hostile? Isn't there a chance that any aliens we encounter could come to us more like E.T. and less like Predator?
Yeah, personally, I think for the most part, alien civilizations that are 1,000,000 years ahead of us have had 1,000,000 years to sort out racial, sectarian, and religious differences among themselves. So I think for the most part, they're going to be peaceful. And for the most part, they're going to find resources on uninhabited planets. Why bother with the Earth with restive natives when you have all these other planets loaded with natural resources and nobody lives on them? However, we do have to plan for the day that maybe a few of them could be hostile.
Now, I'm wondering if there can't be an upside to all this. I'm a big fan of the original Star Trek series, and it was only when, there were alien civilizations that seemed to challenge the Earth that you found that the Earth got its act together for the kind of global governance that all the, all the visionaries say we need that if we're going to deal with climate change, if we're going to deal with all the modern issues, global finance, where the sovereignty of individual nations is actually a political barrier to solving these big problems. So can there be an upside to the alien threat?
Believe it or not, when President Ronald Reagan met Mikhail Gorbachev, we now know during the transcripts of the meeting that he said that if we were ever attacked by the Martians, you and me, the Soviets and the capitalist U.S., would be allies in the fight against the Martians. Well, that's how Ronald Reagan looked at it, and believe it or not, there's some truth to it. If we are faced with a common enemy in outer space, it would indeed help to unite the Earth, just the way Ronald Reagan said.
All right, Michio Kaku, theoretical physicist and an advisor to the new Discovery series Curiosity.
When we physicists look in outer space for alien life, we don't look for little green men. We look for Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3 civilizations. A Type 1 civilization has harnessed planetary power. They control earthquakes, the weather, volcanoes. They have cities on the ocean. Anything planetary, they control. That's Type 1. A Type 2 civilization is stellar. They've exhausted the power of a planet, and they get their energy directly from their mother star. They just don't get a suntan on a weekend. They use solar flares. They use the power of the sun itself to energize their huge machines. Eventually, they exhaust the power of a star, and they go galactic. They harness the power of billions of stars within a galaxy. Now, for example, Buck Rogers would correspond to a Type 1 civilization, a planetary civilization. Star Trek and the Federation of Planets, who have colonized a few star systems, would correspond to a Type 2 system. And the Empire of Star Wars would correspond to a Type 3 civilization. Now, what are we on this scale? We are Type 0. We don't even rate on this scale. We get our energy from, not from stars or galaxies, we get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal. But we can calculate when we will attain Type 1 status, in about 100 years. Now, every time I read the newspaper, I see evidence of this historic transition from type 0 to type 1. And I am privileged to be alive in the most important era in the history of the human race, the transition from type 0 to type 1. I read the newspaper, and I see evidence of this everywhere. What is the European Union? The European Union has been formed to oppose NAFTA, that is, the United States, Canada, and Mexico. But why? Because we're seeing the beginnings of a type 1 economy. Huge planetary trading blocks are the beginnings of a type 1 economy. And what language will this type 1 economy speak? Everywhere I go around the world, I find that the elites all speak English as a second language. In the future, the planet Earth will be like that. Everyone will speak their own native language, but on top of that, there will be a type 1 language, probably English. There's also going to be a type 1 culture and a type 1 political system as well. You can go anywhere on the planet Earth and show people pictures of two individuals that are instantly recognizable by any human: Madonna and Arnold Schwarzenegger. In other words, we're talking about Hollywood movies. We're talking about rock and roll, rap music, blue jeans. That's going to be the planetary culture of the planet Earth. And what is the Internet? The Internet is the beginning of a type 1 telephone system. That's all it is. And so this transition is perhaps the most important transition of all time. Some people don't want it. They fear this transition because this transition is to a planetary civilization tolerant of many cultures. These are the terrorists. In their gut, they fear this because they know they are witnessing the birth pangs of a beginning of a new planetary civilization, and the terrorists want nothing to do with it.